Let's use the banana. Hi guys. Oh, that's good. I think that should work. Yeah. Hi guys. Hi everybody, how's it going? Say hi and tell us where you're from. Oh, look at Ava's joining. Hi Ava. Hi Patrick. Aliyah, welcome. How are you guys? Well, we wanted to tell you about this couple scope. This is our second one. We did one. Thank you so much. Hey, how are you guys? Thank you for the hearts, everybody. My name is Nav, and this is my husband Ryan, and we're very excited to do a couple scope. I think nothing like this exists on Periscope, and we share tips for the couples. Hi from Saskatchewan. Hello, welcome. Wow, so many people joining in. This is kind of nerve-wracking. Well, we're gonna do our best. You have a question? Well, if it's a simple question, we can answer it before beginning. That takes yeah, we'll see. We'll see how this goes.
So let's get into the
scope. Let's get into the scope here. You can ask questions. We'll try to answer it. Thank you. Thanks for being gentle, John. So we're not experts by any means, relationship or marriage or dating experts. We have learned a thing or two by being together for 10 years together in relationship and almost 4 years. Yes, interracial. Yes, thank you for the thumbs up. And we've learned a lot about each other. We've learned a lot about spirituality in relationships, personal growth, and one of the biggest things that we'll answer questions I think afterwards. So let's get into the topic.
Yeah.
Today.
So let's just explain. We had a bit of a theme that we wanted to kind of talk about for this Periscope, and then we'll get into questions after. So we'll have two speeds to this. We'll just talk a little bit about some of the family values that we formally agreed to.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into all the questions. So save your questions. Thank you for having questions. That's great.
So stick around. Canadian. Yeah. Yes, we are Canadians. Yes. Okay. So today we wanted to, we did our first scope 2 weekends ago, and we talked about our love story, how we met. I don't know if many of you caught that, but we caught that scope. But that was our first scope, and since then I've gotten a lot of feedback. And a lot of ladies have reached out to me on Facebook saying, hey, can you talk on the topic of how you solve conflict in your marriage, how you solve, whenever you guys have disagreements, like how do you solve that? And we've had plenty share of disagreements and continue to have them, but we've learned ability to solve those problems. So today we wanted to talk about what is one framework that my husband Ryan here introduced to us. So I'll let him talk about, Ryan, how is it that we came to having family values? Because I'd never heard of such a concept.
Yeah. You're right. So I read a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one of the things that Stephen Covey talked about in that book was the importance of affirming specifically and concretely just what exactly are the values of our family. Mm-hmm. And of course that differs from family to family, but it got me thinking about it, and at the time I made the big bold step of creating family value, which was only one to begin with, which wasn't much of a list, but the first family value we ever had was respect, because perhaps rightly so, it's the first one. It's such an important one. In our first year of marriage, we've been married almost 4 years. First year of marriage, we hadn't lived together before we had gotten married.
No, and we dated for like 7 years.
But never cohabited. So our first year of marriage was a little bumpy. We had a lot of smoothing out to do, and a lot of disagreement, and not all of them were respectful ones either. I mean, that went both ways, right?
Yeah, and, we love each other, but when things got ugly, they got really ugly. And it's like, no, I am right. What do you mean? You are right.
So to preserve harmony in the relationship, I think we both agreed, when we
Yeah.
calm down from time to time, that we need to disagree but respectfully, right?
Yeah, and
it can be done. We always get hot headed, and the person gets gets really intense, right? But it can be done, I think, if a person is mindful of it, to disagree but to do so respectfully, right?
yeah, and I wanted to talk about that family values in a couple, or even if you have kids in a marriage, it would only work if both of the people in the relationship agree to those agree to those values. Because if you got only the husband on saying, yeah, respect is a value, and the wife doesn't think that's an important value, then you can't call your partner out when they are not adhering to those values. So for example, respect was one of our first values that we created, and we both agreed. Hi Melo, thank you for coming. Hi, welcome. So both of you have to be on board thank you for inviting your followers. Thank you so much. Both of you have to be on board for the values that you are coming up with. So for us, it took a lot of brainstorming for Ryan to say, oh, this is a huge value for me. Like Ryan did a whole tally of all the values that he thinks should be our family values, and I did a whole tally that's important to me. And then we looked for what was common. What is it that we were both looking for? And respect was one of them.
Yeah. And the great thing about this, the reason why it's essential that both people have to agree on the family values is because if there's an argument about whatever, and if one person gets particularly disrespectful in that engagement, in that heated argument, for a person, if both people have agreed on the family value, then when that value is not being met in the relationship, a person can point it out and say, hey, I want to keep talking about this, but you need to start being more respectful.
Thank you
right?
for the hearts, guys.
And you need to be more respectful about that. And it comes across, basically you're critiquing the other person, but they're not going to take it personally or as an attack.
Yeah.
Right? They're not going to get defensive about it because, we've long established that respect is a family value. And so it's easier for the offender to self-correct themselves when they've been reminded that
because when you're so heated in an argument, you're just so caught up in your emotions, you sometimes forget, especially when we newly establish these family values, we are so bound to stick to our old behaviors, how we go about solving our arguments. We were like, whoa, we have a family value called respect. You can disagree with what I'm saying, that's okay, but you have to be respectful. You can't be disrespecting me. And the same goes for me too. And whenever he's being disrespectful, even to this day, we've been married almost 4 years, but even if to this day, if we're caught up in our emotions and not being respectful to each other, we just call out gently. We just gently let each other know that, hey, you were just disrespectful there. Like, let's take a break and then continue afterwards. Hey, and I think that works really well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you guys about what our family values actually are, and and then Ryan and I will both share a story on how we went about creating that family value. So our family values are respect. And compassion.
Compassion's number 2. It's really important that both people are both compassionate. Maybe we won't get into why it's valuable. Again, this isn't. We don't mean for this to something that we want to push on everyone else. But this is just for ourselves. And please don't take our family values as an ultimatum. It really doesn't matter what our family values are. What's important is that we have them. And that's what this Periscope is about. It's about the value of having those agreed family values, and not so much about, these are our family values, you better learn. Right?
You better stick to our family values.
So that's not what it's about. Everyone's got different values, right? But anyway, so respect, compassion was number 2.
Then is personal growth. That's another family value of ours. Gratitude, being thankful for what we do have.
That's important.
And then acceptance is one of the latest ones that Hi Book! Thank you for joining. Welcome. Book is a dear friend of mine here locally, and this is so exciting to see some local people on here. Hi Book. And so those are family values: respect, compassion, personal growth, gratitude, and acceptance. And hi from Russia.
Yeah, so personal growth was a big one for us. We added that one on because we both constantly, whether we realize it or not, we're always growing in our lives. And personal growth is healthy and necessary. If we start kind of giving up on personal growth and just we stagnate and we do nothing. And
somebody just asked a question. I'd like to answer it because I think it's a really good segue into what we're going to talk next. A friend of ours, Mello, on here asked, how do we deal with disagreements? And that's such a huge topic, Mello. It's going to be delivered on a big scope on its own. But what I wanted to talk about that was in our first year of marriage, things were difficult. Like Ryan just said, we'd never cohabited together. There were a lot of things that were coming up that was causing a lot of heartache. And I was like, man, I'm married to the best friend of my life. And if you heard our story, I don't know if you did, but we went through a lot of difficulty to get married because my parents weren't on board.
Yeah.
And here we are, after all the difficulty, we got together and got married, and we are still having a lot of fights. Like, what's wrong? And I remember reading a book, and in the book it talked about that when you as a couple come together and talk about I read a book, and it was called The Mastery of Love. I don't know if any of you read it, but in the book it talks about that in a marriage or in a relationship, the reason you continue to have a lot of disagreements is because because Ryan and I are like two people in a relationship, and it's like a pie. Half of the pie is mine and half of the pie is Ryan's. It's not my job as his wife to fix his pie. And what the pie's contents were, as explained in the book, was our fears, our insecurities, our doubts, our imperfections, your past history, your drama, everything that hasn't been healed. Like, all that is part of that pie. And you're gonna bring your pie, and Ryan's bringing his pie into a relationship. Now we not only have my pie to deal with, now I have his pie to deal with too. And so the book really opened my eyes, because it said that you can improve your relationship just by focusing on your own pie. And from now and again, like just this morning, Ryan and I just had a disagreement because I went to go fix his pie, and he's like, no, I don't need that from you. And I realized, yes, I need to focus on my own growth, my own pie. So that's why personal growth came into a huge becoming a value of ours. Let's focus on ourselves, and that improves our marriage.
Not forcing the growth of the other, but focusing on our own personal growth. And at times, as we grow ourselves, we inevitably need help and assistance from others, and then we ask for help, and for me to ask help from you or from someone else, and people who are compassionate, right, will often be willing to give and help out, right? So then it's good.
So
and the fourth personal value of ours, which was gratitude, is tremendously important to us and our family, because without it perhaps lies a life of misery and negativity, right? I mean, no matter what happens in life, good or bad, if you are able to be grateful for what you do have, right, then the glass is perpetually half full instead of half empty, right? And so that's why gratitude, every day or every night rather, we talk about 3 things that we're grateful for, and it helps us keep a more positive
outlook on life.
Even if it was a really rough day and it was stressful or hard. I mean,
that's another thing.
There's lots to be grateful for. And then you go to bed, and things aren't so bad.
Thank you. Yeah. So one of the things that I also wanted to say about gratitude was that as a couple, whether you're dating or you're married or you're just living together, you will go through difficult times. And it's not just about, like, gratitude is such a huge personal value of personal value of mine too. I find that, as being a couple together, we've gone through so many difficult times just about even before getting married, that gratitude, no matter how much we didn't have in our life, gratitude always turned everything into enough. It's such a powerful practice. It's a huge practice of mine that I kind of write in my journal every day, and it really helps us focus on the good in life, and because there's always going to be bad, right? And True, 34 years, but we stay together. Wow, somebody's been together for 34 years, they said. That's
good.
excellent.
Great.
We can
Wonderful.
learn lots from you. How many years have you been? We've been married 4 years, but we've been together 10 years.
Yeah.
And so today we're talking about our family values. So, Ryan, why don't you talk about how did we pick certain values? Like, do you want to talk about
Yeah,
it?
okay. So we started with acceptance because in our first year we fought a lot. Or sorry, no, we started with respect because
I'll
we
talk
could,
about that.
because we
I want to talk about respect. You can talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
it.
okay. Well, okay. So acceptance was the most recent family value that we added. We added it just last spring. Our son passed away, our first child, and that was difficult, and that's a whole other can of worms that we'll talk about in a different periscope. But in talking with the counselors from that event that were counseling us, I was telling the counselor about the 4 family values that we had at the time, and coming to accept the death of our son was such an important part of the healing cycle, because when you go through grief, there are different stages of grief, but acceptance is ultimately the final stage of grief, when you can you start with denial and anger and depression, but ultimately when you come to accept the grief, and it is what it is, that helps you move on most effectively, and more authentically and completely. So acceptance with the hard truths of life is became the final family value of ours most recently. We learned it in a really difficult way, but I realized that acceptance was a good family value because it also retrospectively applies to a lot of other things, right? Whenever there's hard truths that we have to face, whether it's death or for example, if one of us were to get fired from a job, well, you need to accept what's happened, right? Rather than be in denial or be in anger or be depressed about it. You need to accept that it is what it is, and that's how you move on. So because
Don't you love him? I just love this guy. This guy called my husband. Anyways, so that's the latest value that we added to our family values. The one of the first values that we added is called respect, and that one we came to like we said in our first year of marriage. Yeah, great guy. Thank you, John, for saying that. People are commenting about your nature.
Yeah,
it's
that's
really
fine.
coming through. We wanted to talk about respect, how we came about to that value, and it will tell you a lot about my nature and how much I've grown in my marriage and as a person. For me, personal growth is huge, and whenever something is going difficult in life or I'm going through a difficult, challenging time, I always focus on how I'm reacting to certain things. So us getting married, like I said, I was questioning myself that did I make a right decision to marry the love of my life? Like, did I make a wrong decision? I was going through a lot of that back and forth in our first year of marriage. And I found myself, whenever I grew up in my family, I grew up in my house, solving arguments by not fully communicating and by not fully saying what I really meant to say, and saying that I'm actually hurt by what you said, instead of saying that I would hide and I would cry and I would leash out in anger. So that's kind of how my technique was to handle disagreements in our marriage. I mean, I'm going to be truthful and vulnerable here and say that those were the tools that I knew on how to handle disagreements. So whenever Ryan and I would had disagreements, I would yell, and because I was so frustrated. But after few months of doing that, and it was leading to a lot of difficulty in myself and in Ryan, and our relationship was feeling really sour. And I started to ask myself, what is it that I'm missing? And Ryan came up with it, and he said, one of our big values is respect. We can disagree with each other, we can be angry with each other, but we need to be respectful. And so now what respect to me looked like at the time, and it required a lot out of me, because my natural behavior was to get angry, to yell, have a yelling match, whoever is louder kind of wins. That was my approach, and it wasn't working because I was hurting him, and he was telling me that, Nav, what you're doing is hurting me. And here I am hurting myself and hurting him. It's not helping anything. So the value of respect was me really just taking a look at my behaviors on how I am when I'm angry towards Ryan, or instead of me being disrespectful, how can I say the same message but with keeping respect? And it was kind of like right away, just with awareness that I would, instead of saying my point loud, I would say it with calm and respectfully, and say, you know what, Ryan, I don't agree with you, but I see what you're saying, and try to maintain a calm demeanor, and it's really served us having family values. And I think once we do have kids and our family grows, having family values as a couple is so important, because then you're always on the same page, and the communication is clear. And we just wanted to share this tool with all of you today. If you're having difficulty in your relationship, whether it's a challenge to communicate better, it really puts both of you on the same page, and both of you feel heard, and you can call out on each other. And so we really hope from the bottom of our heart that you'll take this tool, read the book. What was the book again?
It was just a small part of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah. So
there's a lot more in the book other than family values.
But that's where we learned about the idea.
That's where the idea sparked my mind.
Yeah, and so it's really served our family, and so we'll continue to abide by it. I learned yelling from my parents.
Well, the truth is, we all learn everything from somewhere, and the great thing, exactly, it's all about unlearning. The phrase that we like to use is conditioning and reconditioning our mind. And our habits. I never took psychology in school, but since leaving school, I've learned so much about psychology since that we have to rewire our habits. And a person doesn't actually unlearn anything. You only can replace a habit by enforcing an alternative habit in that situation. So rather than unlearning yelling, you have to learn
new behavior,
patience and respect when you're in the heat of the
John,
moment. And again and again and again, and you recondition it and it becomes a habit.
Yeah, and John, I just wanted to say that having yelling matches was something that I learned from my parents too. But as adults, if you realize that you yell, that it's a behavior that you've learned. Just like how you learn yelling as a behavior, you can learn, like Ryan said, a new behavior. And for me, I really came to this conclusion that me yelling is hurting my husband. It's hurting my relationship with him, and I don't want that. I want a very high level of understanding, a high level of compassion in our relationship. I actually want to do things that make my husband feel good in this relationship, and I want to feel happy.
Yeah.
And keeping all of those things in mind, it was a priority for me that, all it takes is for me to change my behavior to have a really awesome marriage. Then I'm going to answer that call. And it was hard. But I'm not saying it's easy, but it's been worth it. It's been worth it. It's been worth it to see us solving agreements, but being calm about it and not having a yelling match. And so it takes a lot of personal growth. So I would recommend to be easy on yourself and just realize that with awareness, you can heal behaviors. And so the fact that you have awareness that, I've learned yelling from my parents, you can bounce back from it. I have done it. You can do it too.
Yeah.
Just takes time sometimes.
So I know other people earlier in the scope wanted to ask questions.
Oh, yeah.
We'll kind of open that opportunity up now. Some of them might have dropped off. But
I know.
if anyone's got any other questions or suggestions for future Periscope videos, we're happy to come back and try it again.
Please let us know. I think Mello asked, how do you guys solve your disagreements? I think that has been asked a couple of times. So we'll share kind of what works for us.
Okay.
But do you guys have any questions before we get going? I've really enjoyed today's scope. Hey, Ryan, what did you say?
Oh, yeah, it's lots of fun.
Yeah.
A little nerve-wracking, but it's good.
Yeah. A little bit scary, but 20 people joining in. And thank you so much for the hearts, you guys. Are faith and spirituality important? Ryan, how would you answer that?
I think in order to answer that, first you have to define what is faith and what is spirituality. And I mean, just on a personal level, we take less of a religious view to faith and spirituality. in that, well, I don't know how I'm going to define faith, but I know...
I can answer it.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
For me, I personally think that faith and spirituality are like the foundation of a relationship. And the reason I say that is because when times get tough in a relationship, or times get tough in general, like a few months ago, we lost our first baby, and that was a very, very difficult time for us, for Ryan and I, and for our family.
Yeah.
And it's bad time, in those bad times, you will need to believe, and you will need to have faith in something, that life will be okay and that we can get through this difficult time. And so faith and spirituality for me is like a rock in our relationship. For me to have faith in God, for us to pray together, for me to meditate and calm my mind down, and for us to be having that family value around personal growth, I think that's very closely aligned with spirituality. Ryan and I made a decision about 2 years ago to, instead going to religious temples, to start going to spiritual center. And our city has a spiritual center where we both go, and
it's more of a multi-faith kind of Sunday.
Yeah, because it like being in a interracial marriage, it doesn't really matter about the race. What matters more is how you are as a person. So for me personally, in my marriage, faith and spirituality is a foundation. I rely on it when I go through difficult times, and I think as soon as we go through a difficult time, my faith gets stronger. That no, there is a universe backing us out, and there is a universe backing us up. Sorry, and there is a higher power, that nature that will take care of us, and that will take care of things. All we have to do is do our part. Do our part of learning and unlearning new behaviors. And
yeah, and the very concept of faith could even be expanded. Like most conversations of faith is just limited to the idea of there being a supreme God or something like that, right? And that's good and well, and many people believe that, and that's great. But faith can also sometimes, the word can be used in another way. Faith can also describe, by having faith, a person can also have a certain perseverance to get through an incredibly difficult time when there's no certainty or clarity around how it will be done, right? How does one overcome all odds when it seems that something is doomed to fail, right? I mean, that it can be related to perseverance in that sense, just having faith, right? Now, that isn't about God, though, but I mean, it's about
keeping faith. Yeah, it's about keeping faith.
That's another way to use the word faith. So again, when someone asks a question, but what do you have faith in spirituality? I mean, well, again, it depends on what a person means by faith. Do we each have faith? Yes, just maybe different types, and that's okay. Right?
And that's okay.
We work through it.
Yeah, that's right. Do you guys have any other questions? Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah.
We like talking about these topics, spirituality and having faith in relationships.
So if you liked our Periscope talk, we are endeavoring to have one every Saturday afternoon.
Yep.
And so we try to think of a topic that we can talk about, so we have something to say, and we'll try to do this again a week from now.
Yeah, so hopefully you join us. Are my parents still opposed? No, they love Ryan a lot. My mom sometimes says, I have a younger brother, and my mom sometimes says, Ryan is the son that I always wanted. So, no, we've come a long way. In fact, Ryan and I only decided to get married once my parents said yes, and that's why it took a full 2 years for us to get married. From the time that his family asked for my hand and to the time that we got married, it was a full 2 years wait just for my parents to say yes. But no, they love him. We have a very good relationship. It's been in the works for about 4 years, but who doesn't like Ryan? I mean, you guys know him by now.
So there was two questions. One was on your parents and one was on communication.
Okay.
I think...
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the reason, your parents were very adverse to us getting married just because they didn't really integrate very much with having a lot of other white families in town. And so their idea about what white culture was basically just what all the rumors and gossip in your community, all the trash talk was. And what does that add up to? Well, I mean, it's basically everyone's divorced and unfaithful, and you know,
Yeah.
and parents kick their kids out of home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and we're going to marry our daughter into that? No, thank you.
No,
right?
thank you.
I mean, that's natural. So
Yeah.
fortunately, we got our families to meet together, and they realized that my family was an exception to that strange,
Yeah.
you know,
I don't know,
thought,
I guess
right?
the stereotype.
Exactly,
that,
the stereotype, even though it isn't particularly accurate. I mean, at least my parents seemed the exception to the stereotype.
Let's just
and that brought a lot of
let's just say that like whatever my parents thought the white culture was all about, Ryan's parents were, yeah, exactly, John. These were all just stereotypes, and my parents had never met his family, so when they did, they were just blown away on how similar his family was to mine.
Yeah.
And it's and you know how they know that the family was so similar? It's based on off of family values. I mean, sure, my parents don't have a set of family values and his parents don't, but when you talk to each other, you can really sense that family was at the core of a family value, you know, love for each other and care for each other. And at that point, my parents really realized that, you know, it's these are all just stereotypes, and not everybody and his family really does have family values that closely aligned with my family values, and that warmed them up. And so yeah, it was fine after a while.
Yeah.
But,
And yeah, it was good. So there was another question. Oh,
it's amazing how meeting those from other cultures breaks stereotypes. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
There was also another comment about communication, and I think someone said, well, maybe it all just comes down to communication. Well, I wouldn't put it just on communication, right? I mean, there is more to relationship than communication, but it was from the beginning a big foundation in us, because if two people misunderstand each other, there's, especially if that misunderstanding persists over time, you're going to have wounds that infect and will get worse. So understanding each other, and communication is not easy. I mean, we're not taught to be great communicators in school or anything like that, right? So we have to do our best, but you know, it takes patience and practice, I guess, to learn how to communicate.
And also, you know what else is also really good about communication is something I can speak from my own experience. I didn't learn to be the biggest, like to be the most amazing communicator from my family or anything. Like I said, I grew up with yelling matches, and that was how we solved or pretended to solve agreements. But for me, like, my nature is also to stay open to learning new ways, right? If life is not perfect or not good or not happy, then stay open to learning new ways on how to improve your communication too. Like, we read a lot of books. You know, for me, when Ryan and I were just dating, like I said, like, all I had learned to do a yelling match to solve disagreements, and so when Ryan and I started dating, Ryan was saying, you know what, there's a better way to communicate. This is how you communicate to me. This is how you actually have to tell me that I did something wrong to upset you. You have to let me know. I can't read your mind. That was a big one. But what I wanted to say was that when you don't know how to communicate properly, you have to also be willing to learn. Be willing to learn new ways and be willing to apply, because what do you got to lose, right? Like, that's what I asked myself. What do I got to lose? Okay, I might as well learn what Ryan is saying, and maybe it will improve our relationship. So.
Yeah, and remember our first year when we were dating, the kinds of miscommunication we had.
Oh my God.
The thing, one of the challenges around getting better communication is that in order to communicate more clearly and more openly with each other, it requires trust.
Yeah.
Because how do you open up and be vulnerable about your feelings with someone if you're afraid that they're going to use it against you?
Yeah.
Right?
And we had to go through our own journey, though. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't perfect from the get-go,
It wasn't
right?
overnight.
Yeah,
but there was a progression,
There
right?
was, yeah. And even to this day, like even this morning when we had that small disagreement, I came to realize that, you know what, like, Ryan chose to be vulnerable with me last night, and I shouldn't have used it this morning. And I didn't do it on purpose, but most things we do these things things, we don't do these things on purpose, but I just subconsciously somehow just used the information that he said to improve, that he was going to improve on tomorrow, and then he fell back onto the old habit, and I made it my agenda to fix him, and that just wasn't right. So I apologized to him, and I said, I'm sorry, it's not my space, and then we moved on from that.
Yeah.
Somebody said, what do you mean? Nobody can, you can't tell from my bad mood that you did something wrong? Like, that I have to tell you that you did something wrong? Can't you read my mind?
We had a conversation in our early years together. I had to explain the impossibility of my mind reading.
It's just not a skill of
I
his.
just can't do it. Doesn't matter how hard you would send your signals.
I can't do it either. I mean, I can pretend sitting here, I think he's upset because of me, but I don't know for sure.
I mean, I've done 1,000 things wrong. I mean, which one was it this time? I don't know.
Anyways, I think we're done talking for today and let you guys go on Saturday. I really wanted to say thank you for taking the time on a weekend to tune into our scope. It really means a big deal to us. And do join next time too. We'll be back with another topic. I'll let you know on Facebook what that topic will be. And we'll be here for the same time, 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, talking to you about couples, all topics related to couples, relationships, love, and romance. So see you guys. Thanks so much for coming and joining. Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, just press stop.
I did. It's now working.